people identify a level of excellence, a standard of excellence with who you are and what you do. And when you lower that standard, you lower your brand's power.
I don't throw darts at a board. I bet on sure things. Read Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Every battle is won before it's ever fought. Think about it.
Welcome to another episode of the Profitable Property Management Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Whala. I have Phil Owen on the show today. Phil, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
Excited to chat with you today. We can talk about a lot of things related to the industry as a whole. And I want to talk about that with you because you're an industry guy. You've been in this game for a while. You're thinking about the big picture. You're playing the long game. It's something I appreciate about you. I want to hear a little bit about your background, about how you got into this industry. Given that you didn't grow up as a property manager, as neither did I, and yet here we are so embedded in it. How'd you get here?
You know, my path was always destined to be in the property management industry. I have a degree that qualifies for me in philosophy.
Very relevant.
I think clearly, you know, that was what I was going to college thinking. Let's go down the property management path. No, I actually did fiber optic communications out of college, and in doing that, ended up working in an environment where you're managing a labor force, being able to get the logistics and those kind of things. And then went to church with a guy named James Alderson in San Antonio, Texas.
Small world.
Right. And started to move my family back to East Tennessee. And he approached me and said, you know, hey, I've got this company that I'm looking to expand out of Texas. As you go back to East Tennessee, if you meet anybody that's of an entrepreneurial mind who would find this interesting, let me know. And he started telling me about on-site pros. And the more I listened to him, I said, hey, I'd like to talk to you a whole lot more about this. And so long story short, we decided to partner together. And then a couple of years ago, James decided, hey, I'm ready to be able to ride off into the sunset a little bit and spend more time with my grandkids. So myself and a group of investors bought out all but 10%. He's still on our board of directors and still associated with the company. But that was kind of, he brought me into the industry. And of course, he's not only a vendor, he started as a property manager. And so he was able to bring me up in the ways of property management and sort of baptize me into the industry a little bit.
So for those that don't know, what does On-Site Pros do?
So On-Site Pros is a property awareness company, and we're boots on the ground. We're only in 24 markets around the country in 10 states, 11 states now. But we go into properties on behalf of property managers, and as an independent third party, we document with photographic reports the condition of the property before a tenant moves in, periodically during tenancy, and then at the conclusion of the lease. So we're looking to be able to alleviate the problem of security deposit disputes, and then also making sure that there's accountability during the course of the lease to make sure that the asset is properly maintained.
I want to ask you a very blunt and direct question. Property inspections, is that a skill set? Like you walk in, you take some pictures, like what's the value add here, Phil?
Yeah, so when you say it's a skill set, you know, what we really have to be able to teach people to do is to think like a property manager. You know, anybody can take pictures. I say anybody. It's amazing. There are people who that's not their skill set, but in general, you know, pretty much anyone's able to go in and take pictures. But we talk a lot about you're not a picture taker, you're a storyteller. And you've got to be able to learn to think in terms of, and property managers know this, they've trained themselves for years to learn the things to look for that don't look alarming. But my goodness, you see that small brown spot on the ceiling and it looks innocuous, but you know what that's going to lead to if left unattended. So teaching them to think like a property manager, think like a lawyer, and think like a homeowner, to say, if I were the homeowner, what would I want to know about this property right now? So it's really just finding people who are learners, and then finding people who have a certain ability to interact with people, because you're going into tenants' homes. Mm-hmm. Property managers know how fraught with peril that can be.
Sure.
You know, so you gotta be able to to have people who have a way with people and can diffuse tense situations.
So tell me more about that. Unpack that. Give me an example. What's some of the nuance there?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not uncommon, that we show up and knock on the door, and before we can say, "Hi, my name is," they're like, "I'm so glad you're here because I've called you guys 3 times and I've told you that I had roaches and I was 1 day late on my rent." And we're going, whoa. We're not even the property management company, man. But then you get into the house and you discover things that shouldn't be there or shouldn't be going on, and being able to handle that in a diplomatic way and try to not address it in the moment, because our job is not to address those things. Our job is to document it and get it to the property manager, where they can then review that on their own time and using their own resources to decide what they want to do about it. Our job is just to be able to document it and make sure the property manager's aware. So being able to kind of do those things, one of the big things is just being able to put tenants at ease. I mean, we talk a lot about empathy in our business. We try to teach our people, imagine what it would be like to have somebody come into your home and start just taking pictures of everything. I mean, people's dukes go up. It's uncomfortable. And so teaching them to be able to put people's minds at ease, to go, hey, this is not about you. We're in hundreds of homes a day, and we're doing the same report all across the country. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Imagine that you owned another home and someone else was living in it. You would want to be able to look at it and make sure that everything was okay. That's what we're here to do. You're not in trouble. We're just here to document. Just being able to put people's minds at ease. My business partner, Mark, likes to talk about having sincere eyes. I still have no idea what that means. But just being able to put people at ease and take what can be a very tense situation and bringing peace to it.
This brings up an interesting question. When you think about client qualification, the type of company that you do and don't want to work with, I'm thinking about you working for, let's say it's a Class C management company, right? We've heard of a Class C property, Class C owner. Let's say it's a Class C management company, and you're going back there on a quarterly basis, and it's a dump, and it's getting worse and worse, and inspections aren't done. What are the requirements of the type of clientele that you work with? What needs to be true about a management company for you to want to and be willing to work with them?
I don't know that we have just a list of requirements, but we do that. For us, the quickest way for us to part ways, and I don't know if I should be saying, I'm sad to say, but the truth is we part ways with clients on somewhat of a regular basis. What we're looking for is a partnership mentality of people who know that we're there to make them successful, and they want to help us make them successful. There are people who, for whatever reason, see vendors as
errand boys.
That's it. Yeah. And you're going to go do this, and and this is what I want, and this is how I like, we always try to do the right thing. And so if someone...
You're not needing to be told.
That's right. Yeah. So, and that doesn't mean we do it right all the time.
Sure, of course.
We're going to make mistakes. Wow. But we have a long history of fixing the mistakes that we make. When we don't do it right, we're going to own it, improve from it, and try to make right what happened. When people don't have that posture of partnership with us, that's probably the biggest qualification of a client for us. Is we want people who are invested in mutual success, who believe what we believe about our relationship, which is we can make one another better. I don't really mind so much the asset class. We do extremely opulent homes, and we do homes that it's like, oh man, I'm not sure I should get out of the car right now. Both of those are okay, so long as the partnership mentality between the companies, because people who manage the C-class properties also need to know what's happening at the properties, and we want to be able to provide that visibility, that awareness for them. So long as we approach the partnership in the same way. That's really what we're looking for in good clients.
Phil, outsourcing is so interesting to me. Indulge me in this thought experiment. I run a PM company and I want to maximally outsource. How far could I get? I could outsource my leasing lines. I could outsource the entire leasing function. I talked to Sunroom Rentals today. They're new on the scene, and that's what they're doing that. I could outsource a lot of the maintenance, everything from somewhere in between with Property Meld, or I could outsource by using a maintenance call answering service. I could certainly outsource my accounting. I can outsource inspections. So you can outsource a ton. Most folks choose one or two of these use cases, not every single use case. But fundamentally, when talking about outsourcing, how do you think about the value add that exists? In your mind, agnostic of just the category that you sit in, what is the case to be made of when to choose to outsource versus insource?
I think there are two primary criteria for whether you should outsource. Number one is it your specialty? Is it your, Jeremy Pound says, is it your special sauce? Is it what makes you unique? Matthew Tringali says, is it your superpower? Is that what makes your business great? If it's unique to you, and if that's what makes you stand out from your competitors,
probably don't let it go.
You don't want to let that go, But you look at things like accounting, nobody ever gets an accolade from the IRS at the end of the year going, your books look so good. We just, we're going to lower your tax bill because you guys did so well. Like, you either get it right or you don't. That's not what makes you great in property management, right? So that's number one, is just being able to identify the things that aren't central to your identity as an entrepreneur or as a business owner. Number two is having a good company to outsource it to. I'll use accounting as another example. Again, I know of a company who outsourced their accounting, and they outsourced it to the absolute cheapest possible group.
Wouldn't do that. I would not recommend that.
It was an utter disaster. Like, they're still cleaning up the mess, years later from the way that it went. If you can't find someone that you trust, if you can't find someone who's capable of doing it better than you, keep it. But the fact of the matter is, when you outsource, not only do you get something taken off of your plate, you find someone that it's their specialty. And I'll use us as an example. Property managers in general, they scramble around and they're trying to cram in because they've made promises to their landlords that we're going to be on the property every 6 months, every 12 months, every 4 months, whatever. And they're just scrambling around trying to get it. They're getting in the property, their phone's ringing in their pocket. They got the text messages, the emails, the phone calls. They're either distracted by taking those or they're ignoring them. And then they get back to the office and they got 6 hours of work by the time they get back to the office. You're not effective in that, right? But when you outsource it to somebody that is their focus, look at the things that are taking you away from your core focus, whatever that might be. Do the things we talk to property managers about. We want to put you in a situation where you are not out in the field scrambling around. You're not, running on the treadmill. You're able to be back at your command center so that when your owners call, you're there to help them. When your tenants call, you're there to help them. When a lead comes in, you're on it and you're able to grow your business. Find those things, whatever they may be, that aren't core to your, or key to your, central to your identity, and the things that you can find someone who can do it at least as good or better than you are. If you can meet those two criteria, it's kind of a no-brainer to outsource it.
Bryn here from LeadSimple. I love LeadSimple, but that feels like a given. Instead of telling you why I love it, here's Sarah Hatch from Hatch Property Management.
We're very happy, and I recommend so many people to LeadSimple because I'm like, oh my gosh, it changed our world. It totally changed our whole way of managing properties and staying in contact. It's the best business investment I've ever made.
To learn more and connect with one of my teammates, go to leadsimple.com/podcast today.
We'll wrap on this point and then we'll move on from inspections. Self-inspections, new trend, new thing, COVID kind of forced the issue. Necessity is the mother of invention. There's some value there. There has to be some level of value there, but there also has to be some finite limits to the value. Having me report on the possibility of me creating a lease violation, fundamentally, that doesn't really seem to make sense to me. What is the context in which you see some level of value for self-inspections?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So when COVID hit, we have an app called My Walkthrough that allows the tenant it basically replaces the tenant move-in form. And it gives them the opportunity to use an app and self-document the condition of the property where they can say, I don't want to be blamed for this, and I don't want to be blamed for this, and I don't want to be blamed for this. People contacted me at the beginning of the pandemic and said, hey, could you modify that to where tenants could do their own periodic inspections? I was utterly horrified by the idea. I was like, this is the worst possible idea I can ever imagine for so many reasons. And I completely ignored it because I couldn't get, and honestly, to be completely candid, technology is a lot easier way for us to make money than a labor force.
Sure.
Labor force is hard to manage and margins are low. So from a financial perspective, that would have been a really good and easy change for us to have made. Philosophically, I didn't feel good about it in my gut, and I didn't go with it. My mind has changed substantially over the past 8-12 months. I still fundamentally believe you cannot outsource your job to tenants. That is an abdication of your fiduciary responsibility to the owners, so fraught with peril going down that path. You can't say, well, I'm just going to let the tenants do their periodic inspections and I don't need to go do them anymore, or I don't need to have somebody else go do them. But what we've come to believe is, as a supplemental function, there is real power in that. So for instance, let's say you have eyes on the property every 6 months. You or On-Site Pros or some other third party is getting out to the property every 6 months. But let's say at month 3 after you have a tenant move in, you ask them to do a self-inspection and you say, hey, I want you to take pictures of these things, because periodic assessments are designed to do 3 basic things. 1, make sure that the tenant is doing what they're supposed to be doing according to the lease, changing the air filters, changing smoke alarm batteries, mowing the yard, 2, make sure they're not doing the things that they're not supposed to be doing according to lease, illicit pets, smoking in the house or near the doorways, trampolines, swing sets, whatever the case may be. And 3, looking for insurance risks or unreported or unnoticed maintenance issues that you could catch when they're a small deal before they become a very big deal. I believe that a tenant self-inspection can accomplish one of those 3 things. The tenant is not qualified to be a maintenance person to identify things that could potentially become a bigger issue. My gosh, some tenants aren't qualified to turn on the VCR. I can't believe I just said VCR. Can we edit that? The DVD player, the Apple
Netflix.
TV. Yeah, let's go with
Netflix.
that. Thank you. I'm slowly getting into the modern era. 2, good luck getting the tenant to tell on themselves and be like, oh, by the way, here's the
punched a
dog
hole
we're
in the
not
wall.
supposed to have. Yeah, it's so easy for them to cover up what they don't want you to see. Now some of them are going to miss it. Some of them are, the same ones who are, anyway, some of them are still going to give you some of that stuff, but you're going to miss so much. But what it can do is it can hold them accountable for the things that they're supposed to do. So that first function of making sure that they are doing the things that they're supposed to do. You can say, hey, I want you to take a picture of the front yard and I want to take you a picture of the backyard. Show me that in the last 3 months, you've mowed at least once, right? Take a picture of your air filter. I want to know that in the last 3 months, you've changed your air filter. Maybe you're on Second Nature program. I want to look at that date and make sure that it's what it's supposed to be, that you're not just having filters pile up in your closet, Take a picture of your smoke alarms. I want to see that they're still where they're supposed to be, that they're still in place. You can have them do things that show that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing according to the lease. Beyond that, I think it's really reckless to ask the tenant, hey, tell on yourself. Tell us what you don't want us to know. And let that be your only access to the property, your only property awareness. I can't imagine the conversation with the owner when, you go in after, tenant moves out after a year and the whole house is wrecked with cat urine And they're like, how did you not know that they had a cat? I don't know. They didn't mention it in their self-inspection. In their self-inspection, you can't outsource to the tenant. I mean, it's the equivalent of outsourcing, background checks. Hey, tenant, we're not going to do a background check independently.
Can you vouch for these set of facts?
Yeah. Can you just tell us that you're okay?
We trust you.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
I mean, you still have a responsibility to get eyes on the property, whether they're your own or a third party. You can't outsource that to a tenant, but you can outsource to the tenant that one function of, hey, every now and then we want you to send us this set of pictures and show us that you are doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. But you can't get them to tell you what they're doing that they're not supposed to be, and you can't let them be the ones to miss a big maintenance issue that then costs the landlord a whole lot of money because you didn't have a professional's eyes on it.
Sure. Phil, you mentioned James Alderson previously brought you into the business. Since there's been a transition, you've taken over and you're leading and running the business now. Talk to me a little bit about your management philosophy in terms of running the company. I really believe in limiting conviction, limiting aspirational ideals, things I write down, things I promote and talk about, to things that are deeply felt. And for me, the things that are deeply felt are the times where I bumped my head hard against something and I've been forced to learn something. And for me, that tends to happen a lot because I like to move fast. But it's those bruises and those bumps that build the conviction that I really lean on heavily. Thus far in your career, what have you developed conviction around in terms of your philosophy of how you choose to run your business?
So I'll share one philosophy with you that is really central to us. And when we interview, we talk about this to make sure that people fit with who we are and how we do business. We tell them that we want them to do two things in every communication, whether it's a phone call, an email, a text message, whether you're communicating with a property manager or a tenant or a teammate. Anytime you're communicating on behalf of On-Site Pros with another human being, I want you to do two things. One, smile. It changes the tone of your voice on the phone, but even in written communications, it rewires your brain to think differently. My wife will look at me and be like, what are you grinning at? I'm like, nothing, I'm just sending an email, But if you'll smile while you communicate, you'll communicate differently. And I know that sounds weird. Just sit there and think about just grinning while you're writing an email. But it changes the way that you communicate. Two, and if you think that one was weird, it gets worse. Two is always say I love you. And I don't mean that literally, because that's not weird. That's creepy.
That is genuine. If you're doing that here at the event, that is creepy.
But what I mean is always find a way to communicate care and concern. And I don't mean to fake that. Like, that's hard to fake. Genuinely care, And for us, I tell our team, look, tenants, that's not our client. We don't gain any more benefit from a really happy tenant than we do from a mediocre or an upset tenant. As long as we get the job done, okay. But from a human fundamental perspective, we always want our team to think from that person's perspective and find a way to connect with them, find a way to care about them. You'll find everything in life works smoother when people know that you care about who they are. I'll tell you a great example of that literally left me in tears. Early in the pandemic, we were scheduling with a tenant, and they were on the phone and said, hey, what day are you available? And he's like, why don't you guys just come on Thursday? I mean, it's my birthday, but I'm not going to be seeing anybody anyway. We're all locked down, right? So just come on out. The rep got off the phone. I'm tearing up. I'm going to have to fix this. I'm sorry. Got off the phone, called the technician and said, hey, on Thursday, I want you to go by and get some cupcakes. We'll take care of it. Take some birthday cupcakes to this guy. Nobody has to do that. But that guy felt cared for. Connecting with people at a human level is so, so important. If you start with a core conviction like that, everything else kind of falls into place from there. You know, if you really have that genuine concern for people, you want to do the right thing in everything else. Those are the kind of core convictions that if you can establish that with your team, you'll find there's a whole lot of hills you don't have to climb because you know. So when we interview and we talk to people about that, you know, they either are like, oh my gosh, my heart is pounding. I want to be a part of this company so bad. Or they're like, dear God, this is a cult. I can't wait to get off this phone.
Which is great. Either works.
Either way is a great outcome because you've found people who are going to fit or you've eliminated people who won't.
It's polarizing, which means it's clear.
Yeah.
The problem with a lot of values is that they don't obviously qualify or disqualify people.
Yeah.
And people are all over the place with core values, no judgment. I'm thinking of a good friend of mine. One of his core values is loyalty. It's working for him. He's making it work. He's owning it. It's dope. It doesn't work for me. It is insufficiently specific. It's ambiguous. There are certain values that they're more like hygiene factors. And for me, loyalty kind of falls into that category. Is somebody going to say I'm disloyal? How can we, the question is almost like, what are your anti-values? Your anti-values should shed light on what your values are. Furthermore, the values that we've gotten the most traction with, because we've gone through the core value process and it's been challenging at times. There's been multiple iterations. There's been some values that intuitively landed immediately. And I know that they're landing when they're invoked, and they're not invoked in a happy, clappy, repeat it kind of way. They're invoked because they're useful. It's a thinking, relational heuristic that informs and is just genuinely useful in terms of how to do your job. I have an ambiguous situation. A decision needs to be made. I'm not sure. How do I reason about it? Is it contextual? Is it situational? That's compounding a complexity. If you can make a decision based on a core value at a 50,000 foot level, that's really, really efficient. But the reality is there's a limited number of those values, and they're informed and revealed over time. They're derivative of conviction. You can start off on day one with aspiration. And this is where most people start when they're starting their business. They read a book. What should my core values be? You pick things that kind of sound good. That's where I come back to conviction. I appreciate you sharing that value. Another value that I want to share about you that I pick up and I perceive is I see the patience that you have. I see you playing a long game. This podcast is for residential property managers of America. However, there are also vendors that listen to this podcast. Let's just pretend we're having a fireside chat with some other vendors for a moment. I want to address them and where they sit. I observe you as somebody that's been really deeply embedded in the community and is playing the long game. And I love playing the long game because there are so few people that want to do it. It's like being in a marathon. All you have to do is just keep going. And you go long enough, people start fading, people start dropping. Talk to me about how you think about investing in the long game when it's not obvious what's going to work. We track SQLs. I don't want to use jargon here, a sales qualified lead. I come to this event with expectations for my team. And when I say expectations, really, that's at the level of my right and left hand, Zach and Bryn. They come with expectations. So it's not like this is happy clappy. There are performance targets. However, I do a whole bunch of stuff that I cannot track the outcome or the yield. I see you doing that too, which is thrilling, rewarding, interesting, makes it fun to be in the industry with people like that. How do you think about engaging in that act and then the kind of faith that's required?
I appreciate you saying that. And it is something that we've been in this the company's been in existence for a little over 12 years. I've been in it around 10. And it is one of those things that we know that building great things takes time. And that you have to start with something that people don't change the way they think overnight. And you've got to be able to invest. And, we just had an event together. Our companies partnered together in an event. And it's one of those things where we were doing some broadcasts through that. And my gosh, you know the hours that we all put in together behind the scenes to do that. And then we got maybe 500 views of each video. and you go, golly, when I take down and I break out how many views versus how many hours, man, is that a great ROI? And part of me wants to go, you know what? We're not going to have thousands of people watching this. Maybe we should mail it in a little bit and have a product that's commensurate with the audience that's going to consume it. But if I do that,
that would be rational.
Right? I mean, it would make logical sense. But the way that I think about it is if you do that, your audience never gets to the thousands of people because it's those first 20, 30, 40, 50 people who watch it and find value in it who go, oh my gosh, you guys didn't participate in that? Dude, if that ever happens again, you've got to dive in. That was the best hour that I spent all month. You know, if you look at it and say, I won't accept anything less than my standard, people will eventually find the value in it. But if you start here and say, well, I'll ramp it up to here when there's enough people interested in it, guess what? There will never be enough people interested in it because you're not going to build something that's worth people being interested in. You never get to here if you're providing this. So we decide that we're going to try to perform here and build something that's worth people coming to over time. And so everything that we talk about, you talk about core values. My team has joked that one of our unwritten core values is whole ass.
Two cheeks at a time.
That's right. So maybe we'll tone that down to all in. But whatever you call it, we don't believe in doing things halfway. Even when the immediate ROI is not there, people begin to identify with your brand, whether you're a vendor, whether you're a property manager, whatever the case may be. People identify a level of excellence, a standard of excellence with who you are and what you do. And when you lower that standard, you lower your brand's power. People look at you and say, well, if they did that this way, they're going to take care of my property this way.
And I think honestly, that's not even a conscious thought. It's a intuition. It's a non-articulated thought, but an impulse. If they're that thoughtful, they're probably that way in all things. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think people think it. I think people feel it. It's not cognition. It's maybe cognation. It's something that's kind of guttural, but I completely agree. Micro judgments is something we do all day long. It's the caloric efficiency of the mental expenditure of mental cycles and units to do crazy analysis and in the prefrontal cortex actively evaluating things. It's not practical. So what do? Shorthand. Proxies. You look at situations and you make a snap judgment. In a moment, in an instant, you have a feeling and a gut, and it's based off a series of things that your subconscious is appreciating but can't even fully articulate. But we see that over and over and over again. You know what I call it? I just say vibe. What is the vibe here? Does this feel right? Are people in it? Are they about it? Are they trying to get paid? You and I talk with other vendors, and one of the things that I find interesting is when I relate to other vendors, the size and scope of the game that they're playing feels very obvious to me in a very short period of time. One of the things I'm fond of saying, and my staff hears me say this regularly, I've started a couple businesses, so people come to me for JV partnership opportunities. My staff has heard me say a million times, 99% of biz dev is a waste of time. I come to you, hey Phil, I want to partner. What do I mean? I want you to send me business. You know people. Can you send me business?
Yeah.
That is going nowhere. I have no interest, no time, and no patience in you send me business, I'll send you business. That's a commercial transaction. What works for me is my clients will benefit by using you. I sincerely believe that. And on that basis, because I'm in it, I'm with them. I understand the full depth of considerations in their life, and therefore I'm a trusted advisor and a counselor. It just makes sense. So I don't get paid in these referral relationships. You don't pay me anything, but if I'm talking with somebody that has that need, I would default to recommending what you do. That's a longer game. It's earned, it's bias, it's preference. Are these people enjoyable? Are they invested? It's a much, much longer game, but it's a more satisfying game. And that's what I picked up on what you said previously is the joy. Stamina for me is derivative of enjoying what I'm doing. And I cannot enjoy what I am doing if I am constantly trying to check and calculate the money coming in. The money ebbs and flows. It's up and down. But the things that are true to you when you're playing your own game, staying in your own lane, listening to tuning into the station and the frequency that's authentic to you, that's stamina. So again, I want to salute you for operating in that way. I think there's examples and things that people can learn from you. One of my takeaways is that your game is different than my game. We're both playing the long game, but the way you're executing on it is different than me. I've got my style and fashion. It really works for me. And sometimes I can get on thinking like, I'm doing it the right way. I'm doing it a way. It's deeply satisfying for me. But when I interact with people like you, it's a great check. It's a great reminder. Like you have a different angle. You're doing some things that would not be as obvious of a win for me. I don't know if I could execute on the playbook that you're using. And that's the depth and the richness of being in this industry and meeting other people. I mean, we could list off some other friends that are doing the essence of this same thing, but they're all doing it in their unique way. And it just would not work for me to try to copy you or vice versa. You feel me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and I love what you're talking about at two levels there. One, I think that's the value of partnerships, because there are things that I observe that you and your companies do. This podcast, for example. I mean, you're so gifted as a conversationalist.
You're kind. Thank you, man.
And you bring out great ideas in people, and you help them to provide their story and their value propositions in a way that other people can digest it. That's something that I look at and go, man, I love that. And I would love to sit on this side of the couch across from you and be a part of that. But for me to try to go and build what you've built, that's not something that I'm deeply gifted at. But you and I can partner together and we can co-host a show, and I can come and sit on your show. But this is something that the events are something that we're really great at. Those are things that you guys can jump in, and man, you've got people on your team who contribute so deeply every time we partner together on an event because you've got so many gifted people. We can take our core. We're outsourcing to each other, just like we were talking about. We take the things that we're great at, and then we find people who can help us be greater at them. The other thing I love about what you were talking about, we have people come to us all the time and go, "Hey, we've got this referral program, and if you'll send us business, we'll pay you this and this and this." We've declined every time. We only have one relationship that is financially tied, and that's because there's a software tie-in to how that works. Aside from that, we've declined every time, and I've said, listen, I'm going to decline that, but it's not because I'm not going to send you business. I am. But when I send you business, it's going to be because I believe in your product, because I don't want my clients to ever have to wonder, are they only referring to me to that business because they have some sort of a vested interest? They get something out of it. I want them to know that when I tell you, hey, you need to go talk to, that I'm sending it because I believe that they are going to gain value from that. If I don't have that integrity and that authenticity, then what I say loses value. I would rather have the value in people seeing that I'm invested and care about their business and want their success than have that immediate short-term return. You talk about playing the long game, that short-term return of a check in the pocket, that relationship and trust that you build by moving people in a good direction is so much more valuable over time than that short-term commission check or whatever
It almost kind of
cheapens
cheapens things, frankly.
It's a fact.
It can feel a little dirty to, I'm going to get this little money and I'm going to try and like force some conversation that I otherwise wouldn't have brought up. I think if we relate this to our clients' business, another thing that's interesting about the category that you sit in is that you're closer to the category of vendors. There's a category of vendors that I don't interact as much with, and those are local vendors. I'm so tied in and honestly kind of like narrowly tied into the national vendors, but there's a whole ecosystem. Every time I go to a NARPM regional event, a local chapter event, there's a bunch of vendors that show up, and I don't know any of these people. Some names that come to mind, like ServPro, for example. They're national, but there's a bunch of local vendors. When you think about how this conversation that we're having, the partnership, the dynamicism relates to the property managers and the vendors that they work with, do you think it applies? Is that situation exempt? Is it, is it a guy in a truck and maybe it's like that, it's not relevant there? Or do you see these same dynamics relevant for the PM with their local vendor relationships?
No, I definitely do. And I say that because of the way that I hear property managers talk about other vendors. And I'll give you a great example of that. There's a company that we've partnered together with in Atlanta, Georgia, Integrity Restoration, hyper local. Like they just serve that market. But when you hear their customers talk about them, they know that, hey, when they say something, it's because they believe it, and they're going to do what they say, and they're going to say what they do. Like those same values apply at a hyper local level. At the same, we're a hybrid between the national company and the hyper local that we aspire to be truly national, at least in major metropolitan areas.
Well, 11 states and counting. I mean, you're on your way.
Yeah, we're moving, but it's it's a process. But I think those same principles apply regardless. It's still all about having that credibility. I talk to my kids about credibility, about people believing that when you say something, you mean it. That whether you're at a local level or a national level, it doesn't matter. Having that credibility, establishing those relationships, and having people think about you in a certain way, that everything you do reinforces who you are and is consistent with who you want to be when you grow up. Those are things that to me are consistent across the board, regardless of the audience you're trying to reach.
I like the way you put that. Future state. I've heard it said that you can work for the job you have, you can work the job you have, or you can work the job that you want to have in the future. And I think that applies with any form of ambition. The effort has to exceed the current yield if you want the yield to actually grow. Staying on the subject of vendors, what feedback, advice, or thoughts do you have around retaining good local vendors? I'm thinking in the maintenance category specifically, it's a hot topic. It's a hairy mess. It's a pain point, really. When you think about frustration, like vocal frustration for PMs, maintenance is one of the places that it comes up. What advice or feedback would you have on how to find and retain great vendors?
I think the biggest thing I would say is invest in your relationship with your vendors. Get to know the leadership of the company on a personal level. Go to dinner with them, have drinks with them, spend time and get to know them. And weed out vendors who won't invest in relationships. Because the fact of the matter is, you need to know who you're working with in a sense that when something doesn't go according to plan, you know that, hey, I have a relationship with this person. I know they're invested in my success, and I can call them and say, this is what happened. This is the issue that it caused me. What are we going to do to resolve it? And they're going to jump on it because they're invested in your business and they're invested in your success. If you can establish those relationships, national level, local level, doesn't matter. I think the problem there are two big issues that people run into with outsourcing. One, they outsource it and hands off. It's not my problem anymore. I don't want to touch it. I just assume that it's being done, and there's not even any checking up on it. And then they come back and look at it 3 years later, and they're like, "Well, for 3 years, this hasn't been done the way that I needed it done." Like you taking your hands off too far too quickly. And two, micromanaging at a granular level. Like if you're going to outsource it, you got to be able to give it over. But invest in those relationships on the front end where you can set the expectations, and they can go, "That's not a reasonable expectation. That's not how we're going to," and you go, "Okay, we can compromise on that." But take that time to vet your vendors and spend the time, get to know them. The other big piece of advice I would say in relationship to vendors is until they prove to you that you can't, until they give you reason to question them, don't just call and go crazy the first time something goes wrong. Like call and go, whoa, this isn't what I was expecting. Help me understand what happened here. Give them a chance to fix it and demonstrate how they're going to do it. And if they don't, find someone who will. But if they do, go, okay, I've learned that when I bring an issue to light, I've learned how they're going to respond. I've learned what our relationship is going to be. But that's all relationship. And you can't do that without some measure of investment in relationship, whether that's a phone call, a Zoom meeting, coffee, whatever that looks like.
Indulge me. What would you say to somebody who says, I don't want to have relationships with my vendors. I pay them money. They do work. I shouldn't have to babysit these people or, have beers with them or send them Christmas gifts. So what would you say to somebody that has that impulse?
I would say you're going to get out of a relationship what you put into a relationship. Your level of investment and involvement in a relationship is what you're going to get out of it. Because honestly, and I tell people this all the time, we make it as easy as humanly possible for people to give us feedback on our reports. And I tell them, give it liberally. Like, we are making it easy because we want your feedback. We get better when we understand what our clients need and want. If people aren't communicating, what drives me crazy, Jordan, is people who will hire us and just disappear. And then a year later, they're like, yeah, I just, we got this one.
Sucks.
Yeah, we got this one report back and I didn't like it. And so we just stopped using you. I'm like, what? Why didn't you just call us? Like, would you want one of your landlords to just terminate your contract for 10 houses because one thing happened? Or would you want them to call you and go, hey, wait a minute, not comfortable with this. Is this how it's going to be? What do we need to do? Like,
feedback.
It's a partnership. And great vendor partnerships are built on communication and relationship. So if you don't want to invest in it, then when you go to pull cash out of the ATM, you're gonna get insufficient funds notification. Like, if you're not feeding into that relationship, it's hard to pull out of it when you need it, and it's not gonna work as well for you. And that doesn't mean it's not gonna work, but it's not gonna work as well for you as if you invest in relationship.
Well said. Brother, I'm grateful to be in the industry with you on this same journey. I appreciate your vibe and your ethos of giving back and leaning in and doing great work. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Likewise, my friend. Love partnering with you and love the way that you raise the standard and further the dialogue in the industry. Greatly appreciate what you do.
Thanks, man. Until next time. Jordan here asking you, what do you got? What is a question you want to ask me? Can you stump me? Can you throw me something hard, perplexing, vexing, something you feel tied up in knots with? Throw it at me. I'll do my best to try and answer that question, to dissect it, to parse out the nuance and maybe help you get a bit more clarity. I'm looking for questions as the basis for creating content, and you're looking for answers as the basis for clarity. And wouldn't it be perfect if those two things matched up? Drop a comment, send me an email, jordan@leadsimple.com. Let's stay in the conversation. Peace.